Hello, my name is Frances Toews, and as a way of introduction, I will tell you I am a client of Sandra Fax, and I have experienced Satanism in 3 types. So the ancient ritualistic type, the one that was made into a scientific method through MK Ultra, and a very high-tech variety as well. I've been used as a breeder to produce infants for sacrifice. I've been used in other breeding experiments. One of them was quite esoteric. It went on for years, and it involved being bred with a species that we think is mythological, but it isn't. It just comes from somewhere else. I just recently found out that I also have the equivalent of a PhD in some aspect of technology, and that I was a trainer, but I do not yet know what that technology is. What I will be talking about is the satanic mechanisms that Sandra and I have discovered in our sessions, and also in collaboration with Dave Staffen. This is actually a really hopeful story. It is an amazing journey to start to dig yourself out from under things you never knew were there. So there are many things that we want to share with you, so we'll begin. This is an overarching concept here. Please consider the apple. One of the most famous apples in Western culture is the apple in the story of Adam and Eve. It was the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And darkness deceived Adam and Eve to eat it, and they were expelled from the Garden of Eden. Now, have a look at this. The apple. Let's cut it in half. This way, we can more easily trace the energy lines of an apple. So for me, that means going up through the center, out, around, back, like this. Now, if we put the figure of a little human being in the middle of the apple, this begins to look a lot like something else. It begins to look like the toroidal energy field of a human being who is in a chakra body energy system. So what we found was that the apple is actually a metaphor for the artificial intelligence virus that we were deceived into consuming, that downgraded us from our original divine essence, a light body, into a chakra body energy system. The significance of this is that this chakra body energy system can be exploited in every single way. Every part, every system of parts, every part and system in multiple ways. So that darkness can use us for energy to take parts out of this, and they can leave parts to sabotage us in that system. And this is what we're going to be looking at. Dave just talked about mind control programs, and he mentioned that severe pain, drugs, or terror is used to dissociate the subject. Their consciousness leaves, and then instructions are whispered into the left ear, which goes right into the subconscious. Our subconscious drives our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. So without a great deal of introspection, those programs can control us. I'm going to look at another couple of types of mind control programs. Branding. So we're familiar with livestock branding, in which an iron is used to sear a symbol onto the hide of an animal. In satanic rituals, they can brand your energy field with satanic symbols and put mind control programs in at the same time, because just like being burned with a branding iron, the pain of esoteric branding is extreme. So in one case, there were 270 mind control programs. We found that there were symbols associated with them because we could not sway them out, the method that Sandra talked about. We had to find out what the healing symbols were, not what the satanic symbols were. These were divided into 7 groups that were activated by event in the life, not by date. We had to find out what all those programs were, what were the events, what were the programs, how would they affect the person when they activated, and what was the healing protocol. And what I want to show you is the healing symbols that we found. So many of them are from sacred geometry and the Egyptian mystery school. So Eye of Horus, Flower of Life, Metatron's Cube, Tree of Life, Feather of Ma'at, and the Ankh. Now we're going to go a little bit ahead in this. This is a very sophisticated way of putting mind control programs in. Obviously, there was a lot of information we had to find in order to remove these. So nobody's going to stumble across this in a random way. So I'll just show you, for example, let's say the 7th event. The symbol was the Ankh. There were 30 programs. 7 chakras were involved, but to heal it, the healing symbol had to be shone on the chakras in a specific order. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So muscle testing helped us with this. The color of the light was significant, the size of the symbol, and once we began to investigate this event, we had 3 days to complete everything. So it's pretty sophisticated. Here's another type of mind control program. Prime commands are like master programs that are inserted into the primordial essence of us before we ever incorporate. And just like the primordial soup from which life emerged on the earth, where there were pre-life fragments that would eventually combine to form life, Satan inserted pre-life geometries that predisposed us, or actually locked us in, to certain thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about ourselves, about others, most notably in our soul group, and about God and about what is good. The healing for this energetically was like a Muslim divorce, which is, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you. So we were just required to say, I reject the prime command that God hates me, for example, and do that 3 times, and then put in, I now accept that God loves me, as an example. That takes care of prime commands. I'd like to tell you about ladanum. Many of the memories that we encountered included a metal that had a silvery color, but it had a devastating effect. And every time I would say, that's called ladanum, it would just come to me. Sandra would muscle test no. So when this happened over and over, we made a proposal because two good sources really don't disagree. We're just missing a piece of information. So we proposed that because the metal itself was so devastating and damaging, that ladanum was actually a code name created by friendly forces so that they could refer to that substance without injury, and that muscle tested correctly. So one day in session, the field of consciousness would not let us leave the subject of ladanum. We were required to research its composition and to learn its frequency. So we found out that there were 4 metals. Probably like us, you would think, what's the most toxic metal? Mercury. And yes, mercury was one of the elements. We next chose lead, but surprisingly it didn't make the team. And it was silver. Silver has a particular quality of perfect reflectivity. I'm not sure exactly how this works, but it is related to its function in ladanum. We named all the other metals we knew, and were forced to go to the periodic table of the elements, where muscle testing showed that it was element 105, dubnium, and element 109, meitnerium, that completed the set of 4. Now, dubnium and meitnerium are man-made radioactive elements that are formed under extreme experimental conditions. So we looked up the Lawrence Livermore nuclear test research facility, and they listed dubnium and meitnerium, the purpose of them, as experimental and esoteric. It also said that they were superconductors. We found that superconductors open portals. The frequency of ladanum is the loosing of all hell. Now, when I think of those elements that are in that metal, I have to ask about silver and mercury filling almost everybody's mouth. Like, that's kind of, there are no coincidences. And how would they get dubnium and meitnerium in? They could simply project the frequencies of those metals, which would make our mouths portals for darkness. There's great power in the word, and if everybody started speaking those low frequency words. So we'd like to tell you our findings on biophotons, monatomic gold and iridium, and much of what we know about this comes from Harold Coatsvella, who reports that at a very, very deep physiological level, we communicate with biophotons. We communicate with light. And when you look up biophotons, they begin as point sources of light, and they evolve and they expand through the shapes of sacred geometry. So biophotons, monatomic gold and iridium are biophoton attractors. In other words, they enhance and facilitate communication with light. Where are they found? They're found within the spiral of the DNA molecule. A big communicator. Now, what we found in our research is that darkness can remove our monatomic golden iridium from us. What would be the consequences of that? We would literally be dimmed, darkened, since everything happens physiologically because of communication with light. They take that away from us and we would be dimmed. Everything would be slowed down. All our processes. It would be very hard to keep going. But I would like you to consider two more facts. Monatomic golden iridium are considered to be in the M state, which can be described as existing in a higher dimension. Dr. J.J. Hertog, who wrote The Keys of Enoch, says that the nucleotide pairs, adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, are actually God codes within us. So, when they take away something that's existing in another dimension, communicating with God codes, you can see that it would shut down our ability to communicate with the divine. For us, this happened at a huge electromagnetic event at a certain place on the earth, and the healing will be to return to that place on the earth and do ceremony, but we don't have the details of that yet. Okay, little difficult words here. Why do Satanists prefer sodomy? Could it be that there is more than just the pain that is inflicted by sodomy to dissociate a subject? Well, it turns out there is. So when a person is sodomized, the sodomizing object impinges on a bundle of nerves inside at the base of the spine. That causes light to appear in the brain. Another researcher, F.A. Pop, found that light in the brain, such as that, induces DNA to act like an excimer laser. So an excimer laser is a really high UV output instrument capable of doing ultrafine microsurgery. So the LASIK eye surgery is done by an excimer laser because it can take tissue apart one molecular layer at a time, very precise. So this is an example of ultrafine microsurgery done with an excimer laser on a shaft of hair. So let's think for a moment. If Satanists are performing sodomy to create light in the brain, to induce the DNA to act like an excimer laser to do ultrafine microsurgery, what microsurgery are they doing? They're isolating the pineal gland. You can see that the nerves from the base of the spine come up and end at the pineal gland. So surgically, they are severing the pineal gland. Plato said in the Republic, the soul through these disciplines has an organ purified and enlightened, an organ better worth saving, the pineal gland, than 10,000 corporeal eyes, since truth becomes visible through this alone. So that's a pretty major thing they're doing with sodomy. In terms of DNA, they can also give a person the DNA of any animal. In my case, it was to facilitate those very esoteric breeding experiments. Before I was given that DNA, those experiments were not successful, but after they did that, they were successful. They can also add the DNA of a negative trait, or they can add the DNA of a dark entity. The healing for the dog DNA was to get archetype of dog to roam around the body in the presence of Christ and collect all that DNA. And that was so neat because it formed a dog and it went off with the archetype of dog and played. It was beautiful. Okay, carrying bitumen, the good black goo, is what was the healing remedy for the DNA of self-doubt. And a sulfur mineral bath was what was helpful for the DNA of a dark entity. So with intention, you can bathe in the frequency of a sulfur bath and ask sulfur to do its job. And interestingly, vampires can be warded off with garlic. That vegetable is full of sulfur. Yeah. Okay. When somebody does a very dark action, there is a great deal of karma, negative karma incurred. And we found that the Satanists can actually give their subjects their karma. They can transfer their karma from doing dark things onto the subject, so the subject carries the karma. And in our research, that was called a burden. The healing for this was prayer. And I would like to point out something from the Aramaic Bible. I think it's the most original, untouched version. And in Matthew 11 it says, "Come unto me, all of you who labor and are forced to bear burdens, and I shall give you rest. For my yoke is pleasant and my burden is light." Here's another thing they can do. They can drown their subjects in frequency. So this happens particularly if it's a frequency that can assist a person. Like it might be the frequency of a person who can help you, but they just bombard you with that frequency until you are literally drowning and screaming in it, and you can't stand that frequency anymore, which pretty well ensures you're not going to get help from that person. I was drowned in the frequency of the Christ consciousness. So that resulted in some erroneous conclusions that I had about the Christ consciousness, which simply needed to be identified, and the opposite identified and then swayed out, and that corrected it energetically. The catalyst of darkness. This is an etheric object that is placed on the base of the tailbone. It is volcanic-like, except instead of being hot, it is extremely cold, and it's grinding on itself. It is orbited at high speed by tiny little satellites. Just like a forge, it's planted on the base of the tailbone. Just like in a forge, steel is tempered by hammering it to make it stronger. The catalyst of darkness hammers things, but in the wrong way. It hammers them into weakness. On the base of the spine, it prevents the Kundalini energy, the sacred energy, from rising up the spine. And if you have a look at where the parasympathetic nervous system exists on the spine, that is the nervous system on which spirituality depends. It only goes into the base of the spine and the base of the skull. So that device is, once again, preventing our ability to be spiritual. To correct it, the person sits with their back to a singing bowl as it is played for 10 minutes. And this causes those little satellites to drop like flies. They're like fighters protecting the catalyst of darkness. And then we had to find out, what do we replace this thing with? And it turned out to be called the engine of creation. But the engine of creation has to be started. And the things required for that activation are a piece of gold. The pureness of the gold was significant, not the size. You'll remember that that device is ultimate cold, so there had to be a source of heat. And also 2 essential oils had to be diffused in the area, frankincense and myrrh. And as this was done for 24 minutes, one was to contemplate the esoteric meaning of gold, which alchemically is really beautiful. So, once again, I'm triggered by the similarities with this healing, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. What were the wise men really doing for Jesus in the manger? They were starting his engine of creation. Copper and the nervous system. Copper is a very healing metal. It's very conductive. It's used as wiring in our houses, and it's also used in our physiological wiring, our nervous system. So, thanks to you, we heard that the construction of the nervous system is protein, prion, copper. Protein, prion, copper. Now, Satanists love copper. It's their favorite metal to torture people with. And so the body energetically rejects copper. Then we get things like genetically modified organisms. That genetically modified implies Roundup Ready. Roundup contains glyphosate. Glyphosate chelates out our major minerals: magnesium, copper, iron, selenium, zinc. Okay, so our copper is gone from our nervous system, and chemtrails provide the alternative metals, barium, strontium, aluminum, and so on, that fill in the spaces in the nervous system in order to make us the perfect antenna to receive their signals. Okay. In order to talk about a ritual called the marriage to Satan, a little bit of energetic anatomy. On this left-hand drawing, there's a channel that runs from the 7th chakra down to the 1st chakra. It's called the inner flute. And it connects to planes of spin and then to the chakras. The inner flute's job is to conduct the divine masculine from above down through the top 3 chakras, where it powers them in a meaningful way. From below, it accepts the divine feminine energy coming from below, channels that in a meaningful way to power the 3 lower chakras. They can do their jobs, but it also allows divine masculine and divine feminine to meet in the heart. So the marriage to Satan involves, like a little alert here, it involves extreme sadistic intercourse, which shocks the 1st chakra so much, and because of the pairing of the chakra, it shocks the seventh chakra, that the inner flute loosens and it just comes sliding out. So you've got an energy body without an inner flute. So what's the effect on us? If we imagine that we're a house, and over here we have municipal gas and water being delivered in pipes to the house. Inside the house there are pipes that take those resources and deliver them in a meaningful way that powers all the appliances in the house, just like our energy body. If all these internal pipes were to disappear like that, we might get some flooding here, but those appliances are not being supplied in a meaningful way. So what we get is just flooding from top to bottom, and the chakras are not powered, and divine masculine and divine feminine never meet in the heart. Actually, 4 days after having this memory, the inner flute just came curling back through the air, and it inserted itself all on its own. Sometimes when we know that something of ours has been taken, that's enough to heal it. Now, there was some other healing involved in the dysfunctional relationship with one's own sacred response. But all of this can be healed energetically. Something else they can do, they can take part of your chakras into the void. They just like pull on the line and put it in the void. There's a lot of really nasty things roaming in the void. Means they have access to you through that entryway anytime they like. The healing for this involved identifying the reason the chakra was in the void to begin with. Why did it have that propensity? Healing that event, the triggers, the programs, and then asking Christ to pull it back, cleanse it, because it was in a nasty place for a long time, and have him reintegrate it. Something else they can do with your chakra is reconfigure it in the shape of a maze. So a maze is a puzzle that is meant to confound, perplex, make it not easy. So it's multiple pathways, dead ends, blind alleys, wrong turns. So if the energy in our chakra has to get from there to there, it's going to make it very difficult for the chakra to function. The healing for this was to walk a labyrinth. Now, a labyrinth is not a puzzle. It is a single path with great spiritual symbolism. You stand at the entrance of the labyrinth, whether it's an actual labyrinth or whether it's a model or something you reprint from the internet, and you state your purpose. Then the walk in is about just surrendering everything. Let go. You have stated your purpose, now get out of your own way and let something higher answer you. When you get to the center, it symbolizes our spiritual center. Then you will receive some information and enlightenment, and then the walk out becomes grounding and manifesting what you received into this reality. Horcrux. The books and films of author J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter series, talked about Horcrux, and we found that this is a bona fide satanic mechanism. So the way it works is a part of one's soul would be dissociated through a horrific event like a murder, And then that soul piece would be put into an object with a piece of a rotting corpse soul of someone like a Toronto cult leader who had just died. So it is by the process of quantum entanglement that the soul piece in the Horcrux contaminates the soul that is still left in you. They're both acting like they are in the presence of a rotting corpse. And people around you can sense that. And the soul has to struggle all the time to overcome that. The auric field bisector. It is a property of one of the crown princes of hell to project electromagnetic scalar interference patterns. So one way of understanding scalar is that where the normal radiation we're used to, like light, sound, heat, originates from a point source, travels through space and time. Scalar does not travel through space. It is cast, it stays in place, but it projects through time. So in this one, the entity cast something that just cut the field in half. So the top cannot communicate with the bottom. And this one was at heart level, completely stopping love. Not allowing love to rise above the third chakra, which is power and control. The healing for this was making a poultice of wild rose. Rose is about love. So just collected leaves, flowers, some thorns, some soft stems, put it in a blender and put it on for 15 minutes, and that took care of that. How are we doing for time?
That's one of my suggestions would be that we answer questions.
Okay. All right. This one is a little complex, so we're going to go to the next one, the rebirth in Satan. This is where, pardon me, it's a bit of an alert, where the person is put inside the body of an animal, cow or a goat, that is being tortured to death and dying. So that, imagine what happens. The auric field of the subject is completely contained within the auric field of an animal that is being tortured and dying. So when that auric field of the animal dies, your auric, the electromagnetic layer in your auric field dies in sympathy. And this creates an electromagnetically insular bubble. So let's say the subject wants to send out a message of love or connection. It hits the bubble, bounces back. If somebody on the outside wants to send a message in of love, hits the bubble and bounces back. And there's never any real true communication. Because this was electromagnetic, it was healed by magnets in a certain process. And this was the process, the magnets at the cardinal points. I'd like to do one final one with you, and that is screw-ups. One day, Dave and I were working together, and Dave said, "Friend, could you just look in the psychic space? I've got pain here in my elbow." And so I looked, and there was this spiral coming into his elbow and just screwing right in. It looked like a Fibonacci spiral. And from that, you know that if you want something to stay in place, you use a screw and not a nail. So this thing was screwed right into the elbow. And this is the way we were given to understand this. So here are the souls. We'll just imagine souls going on the assembly line into incarnation. There's Satan standing there with a clipboard, and he sees the soul's purpose. And he says, oh, so you think that's what you're going to do? Well, I'm going to add some factory upgrades. And so he can add really one or more spiral pathways from darkness. Because they are screwed into the soul, they go with you from lifetime to lifetime. We had noticed that, yeah, a person gets injured in the same place in the body lifetime after lifetime. And that's because each part of our body has a symbolism for the accomplishment of our soul purpose. So, for example, shoulders. Atlas bore the weight of the world on his shoulders, and shoulders are about bearing our soul purpose with joy. So, if darkness put a spiral pathway into the shoulder, that means that in any lifetime, they can send in the frequency of any injury. So in a medieval lifetime, it might be a lance through the shoulder. In a lifetime in the American West, an arrow through the shoulder. In another lifetime, amputation at the shoulder, all of which impedes us lifetime after lifetime from accomplishing our soul's purpose. The healing of this was using a nano health wand, which is a special fusion of crystals, magnets, and minerals. And where the, I'll demonstrate here on my knee, is if the screwed in clockwise, you would use the health wand to unscrew it like this. And it was 5 minutes a day for 9 days per screw up. And then on the very last second, you're finished your 5 minutes. On the last day, you ask for a spiral pathway from heaven, and you just screw it in once, clockwise. We also found that just like the Germans protected their communications with codes, many satanic programs are protected by Enigma codes that resurrect the program, and the date of those resurrections is January 1st, period of 1 year. Gives a new possible meaning for why we do New Year's resolutions. And in closing, I'd like to say that we've got this energy field that we were downgraded into. So one thing we can do through energetic healing is to pull back the pieces they've taken away from us, like complete this field. Throw out all of the darkness and mechanisms they've left in us by energetic healing. But we're not the only entity that has a toroidal energy field. The earth also has a toroidal energy field. And we have heard that the world belongs to Satan, and it does. But by energetic healing, we can take it back. And when you complete your chakra body energy system, then you can transcend it like a hot air balloon. Just throw out all the dark ballast, rise in your level of consciousness until you can make your life a little bit better, or you can make it a lot better, or you could choose to go all the way and find out who you really are. Thank you. Okay, hello. My name is Frances Toews, and as a way of introduction, I will tell you I am a client of Sandra Fax, and I have experienced Satanism in 3 types. So the ancient ritualistic type, the one that was made into a scientific method through MK Ultra, and a very high-tech variety as well. I've been used as a breeder to produce infants for sacrifice. I've been used in other breeding experiments. One of them was quite esoteric. It went on for years, and it involved being bred with a species that we think is mythological, but it isn't. It just comes from somewhere else. I just recently found out that I also have the equivalent of a PhD in some aspect of technology, and that I was a trainer, but I do not yet know what that technology is. What I will be tested in multiple ways, so that darkness can use us for energy to take parts out of this, and they can leave parts to sabotage us in that system. And this is what we're going to be looking at. Dave just talked about mind control programs, and he mentioned that severe pain, drugs, or terror is used to dissociate the subject. Their consciousness leaves, and then instructions are whispered into the left ear, which goes right into the subconscious. Our subconscious drives our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. So without a great deal of introspection, those programs can control us. I'm going to look at another couple of types of mind control programs. Branding. So we're familiar with livestock branding, in which an iron is used to sear a symbol onto the hide of an animal. In satanic rituals, they can brand your energy field with satanic symbols and put mind control programs in at the same time, because just like being burned with a branding iron, the pain of esoteric branding is extreme. So in one case, there were 270 mind control programs. We found that there were symbols associated with them because we could not sway them out, the method that Sandra talked about. We had to find out what the healing symbols were, not what the satanic symbols were. These were divided into 7 groups that were activated by event in the life, not by date. We had to find out what all those programs were, what were the events, what were the programs, how would they affect the person when they activated, and what was the healing protocol. And what I want to show you is the healing symbols that we found. So many of them are from sacred geometry and the Egyptian mystery school. That means going up through the center, out around, back, like this. Now, if we put the figure of a little human being in the middle of the apple, this begins to look a lot like something else. It begins to look like the toroidal energy field of a human being who is in a chakra body energy system. So what we found was that the apple is actually a metaphor for the artificial intelligence virus that we were deceived into consuming, that downgraded us from our original divine essence, a light body, into a chakra body energy system. The significance of this is that this chakra body energy system can be exploited in every single way. Every part, every system of parts, every part and system talking about is the satanic mechanisms that Sandra and I have discovered in our sessions, and also in collaboration with Dave Staffen. This is actually a really hopeful story. It is an amazing journey to start to dig yourself out from under things you never knew were there. So there are many things that we want to share with you, so we'll begin. This is an overarching concept here. Please consider the apple. One of the most famous apples in Western culture is the apple in the story of Adam and Eve. It was the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and darkness deceived Adam and Eve to eat it, and they were expelled from the Garden of Eden. Now, have a look at this. The apple. Let's cut it in half. This way, we can more easily trace the energy lines of an apple. So for me,